Thank you for joining us. We will start this meeting with a word of prayer.
Heavenly Father, dear Lord, thank you for this day, the day that you have made, Lord. And I pray someone is healed today and blessed tonight from hearing our panelists. And I want to thank you, Lord, for allowing Women of Color this platform to educate and to help others. Lord, let us come together and put you first in all that we do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
My name's Evelyn McGovern, and I'm the president and co-founder of Women of Colors. And I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us this evening. We are excited to welcome those of you who have been with us for a long time now, and those of you who have joining us this evening. I also want to especially thank our panelists for accepting Women of Color's invitation to talk this evening about suicide and mental health awareness. WALK is proud to be able to host this event today on this platform that includes WTOZ, KISS 107, WSGW, The Moose, WGER, and Women of Color's Facebook page. I want to thank you again for your time, and I want you to welcome our moderator. I want to welcome our moderator, our wonderful moderator, Miss Vicki Hill.
Thank you, Evelyn. Here's a little bit about Women of Colors. Women of Colors is an independent nonprofit organization that has been active in our community since 1993. The organization was developed with a diverse group of women sharing their ideas to improve the Saginaw community. Women of Colors recognizes the strength of diversity by not focusing on the differences but acknowledging our similarities. Women of Color's mission promotes multicultural diversity and enhances the community relations in the Great Lakes Bay region by empowering families and performing community service, mentoring youth, and collaborating with other organizations. In 2015, Women of Colors helped establish the Student and Future Technology, which is also known as SAFT. It's a program with science advisor Richard Springfield, and he helps to stretch students' understanding and ability to current knowledge and science and new technology. Women of Colors collaborates with area schools, churches, businesses, agencies, and other organizations to make a difference. And Women of Color spends countless hours to enrich the culture of volunteerism and service that makes the Saginaw community a great place for individuals to live, work, and play. In 2017, Women of Colors hosted their first How I Overcame and I'm Still a Man forum. Now, this is a forum that allows men and women to talk about the struggles that they've had in life and how they overcame them, which is inspiring and very encouraging. So, congratulations to Women of Colors for all that we do in the community. Hello, I'm Vicki Hill, and I am a part of Women of Colors. Actually, I am the vice chair. Also, I am a radio personality for KISS 107.1, one of the Alpha Media stations. Tonight, we have a panel of individuals who are going to speak on our topic tonight, Mental Health and Suicide Awareness Part 2. We had Part 1 somewhere around March or April and May in that area. Well, we heard a lot about that forum and there were still a lot of questions. So we decided why not come back with part two? There is so much information that we need to get out to individuals who might be going through some mental health crisis or might be contemplating suicide. We want to get that information out to you and tell you, let you know where you can find resources that could help enrich your life and maybe change the direction that you're going, or even just to give you information as to what doctors you might want to contact. So tonight on my panel, we have several people on the panel, and I'm going to give you just a little bit about them, and then we'll go right into our conversation tonight. We have Dr. Kai Anderson. Dr. Kai Anderson is an assistant professor of psychiatry at Central Michigan University. She is an assistant psychiatry residence program director, director of psychotherapy, training and facility lead for the social justice, anti-racism, and equity curriculum. She earned her bachelor's degree from Wayne State University, as well as her medical degrees. Dr. Anderson completed her residency at Northwestern University and is board certified by the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology in adult psychiatry and forensic psychiatry. Welcome, Dr. Kai Anderson. Next, we have Ms. Wardine Talley. Wardine Talley currently serves as supervisor in the Saginaw County Community Mental Health Authority, the wraparound program. She holds a Bachelor of Social Work degree from Bowling Green State University and a Master's of Arts degree in Political Science, Criminal Justice from Saginaw Valley State University. Wardine has an extensive employment and volunteerism, it's hard to say, history in the fields of social work and human services. Welcome, Wardine. Then we have Farah Wojcik. Farah Wojcik is the site program supervisor of the Saginaw County Community Mental Health Authority Mobile Response Team, which assists residents in the community when they are experiencing a mental health crisis. She began working at SCCMHA in 2015 as a part of the formerly named Mobile Urgent Treatment Team and is working to expand the mobile response program to 24 hours per day, 7 days per week. Welcome, Farah. Then we have Mr. Jason Newsham, who is the CEO of JJK in Hoops, who trains and educates in coaching as well as coaching. So welcome, Jason. I welcome all of you to the panel tonight, and we're going to get into our subject tonight. As I said, we had mental health awareness and suicide awareness earlier in the year, and we decided to come back with part 2 because there were still so many questions, and we got so much out of the first forum, but we want to dig just a little bit deeper, if you will. I know that you have some more information that you can share with everyone who is listening and who's looking on at us tonight. So tonight, we'll start out, and I was sitting at work today, and I was thinking about this again, and I thought about all of the things that people have come to me and have said, and it's just amazing how I thought about this today, how there's so many people in my life that I talk to on a daily basis, or I run into somewhere and it's always a good time, or, we have some laughing moments and some serious moments as well. But it's just amazing how I never knew that they were going through the things that they were going through. It's just amazing for me to know that people can sit right in front of you and they can be going through these mental issues and you never know it. You don't see it. So I'm going to start the question out today because I was thinking about this. I want to ask each and every one of you if you would chime in on what is depression? And after you answer what is depression, how do we know if we have it? And I'll start with you, Dr. Kai.
I think that's an excellent question. Thank you, Ms. Hill. Depression is a state of mind when you notice that you no longer like to do the things that you used to enjoy doing. You may stop reading. You may stop socializing with your friends. You may stop wanting to go to church. And you know it's serious when it continues for a period of 2 weeks or so. And one of the concerns about depression, it can affect all parts of your life. It can affect your ability to sleep, to eat, to concentrate. And one of the dire consequences of depression, it can even lead to thoughts of suicide, which is why we're having this conversation tonight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Farah, give me your take on it.
Yeah, I think that was a great explanation. In addition to that, I would say if you have a sense that you no longer care about the things that you used to care about, like there's a certain level of apathy like sinking into you, that would be something to look out for. And even some people feel more agitated or irritable than normal. So I think those are also.
Thank you, Fira. Wardy?
There isn't an awful lot to add to that. Dr. Kai and Farah covered it well. I think too, if we're looking at others, you mentioned running into people and everything's happy, happy, joy, joy, and you find out later they are really struggling and going through. So if we look beyond the smiles and that as we want to be supportive and helpful to others. So everything that has already been said, but that we often wear a mask, and I'm sure we're going to get delve deeper into that this evening, that we can be supportive to one another to the extent that it may actually be life-saving.
Absolutely. And you know, Jason, I'm going to save you for last because you have a personal story, and I want everyone to hear that personal story because what I've read, what you've told me can inspire and it can help someone else. So I'm going to save that question for you a little bit later. So we found out what depression is. So if I'm depressed, it's more than just me being sad for a moment, right? So from what I'm hearing, it's when things start to change, when I don't want to do anything the way that I used to do it anymore. I don't want to socialize. I just want to kind of lock myself away, right? Okay, so when do I actually know that I need to go and seek help? And the reason I ask that is because sometimes people don't always seek help. We mentioned, or you mentioned, Wardine, that they hide behind a mask. And that's exactly what it is. Because we can look at a person, as I said, and they look normal. They talk normal. They act normal, always the way that I've seen them. But from the first forum that we had, when I started to talk about what Women of Colors was going to do when it came to this forum, is when people started to come out of the woodwork to me. And it got to be a little bit overwhelming because I never knew. I didn't know that people were actually going through the things that they were going through because that's not what they showed me. So how?
I think I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Wardine, jump in.
I think that as a culture, as a society, we teach our sons, big boys don't cry. Come on, you suck it up. And then they grow into manhood knowing it's, that stigma associated with any type of, and I'm using my quotes here, weakness, asking for help. You can't do, and then we teach our daughters, you have to cook, clean, sew, work, bring home the bacon. You have to do all of those things, and not even break a sweat, right? So we have ourselves pigeonholed. We're in these spaces where it isn't safe, and we look at social media. No one posts, man, I'm going through right now, or I need this, or I need support, or now it's kind of cool, to say, oh, pray for me or whatever. But and that's a real good thing. But we even take pictures and show what we're having for supper, and my supper's better than yours. So we are groomed to believe we have to be smiling and happy and achieving and steadily going higher and higher. And when we don't hit the mark, some of it is self-imposed, but let's face it, society puts like just this heavy burden on us, then the sadness and that. And I'm going to talk about adverse childhood experiences as we move on. But, so there are some factors, there are actual events in our lives, traumatic experiences that help us to get from, childhood to here and to be in an unhealthy, even unsafe place. But we dare not speak up and share the stigma associated with it and the whispers that come. So as a society, we have to do so much better in supporting one another and encouraging one another to speak up, speak out, yell if when you know that you need help. And Dr. Kai mentioned very early on in that first definition that after a couple of weeks and it continues and you can't see daylight at the end of the tunnel and you wish to like start giving things away and that listlessness, then you want to be thinking about seeking help. And it's a healthy thing to do, not a weakness.
Thank you. And you know what? It isn't a weakness, but just like you said, people hide behind the mask. People don't want to show weakness because that's what we've been taught for many years, especially men. Men have been taught men don't cry, men don't show emotion. Men always have to be strong, but that's not always the case. I think, and this is my personal opinion, I think everybody has emotions. So what's wrong with showing those emotions, right? And a lot of times when they don't seek, they hide behind the mask and they don't seek out any help. After a while, this thing continues to build. Am I right, Dr. Kai?
Definitely. I think, as Wardena said, that mask is really common. We don't like to talk about what we're struggling with. We like to portray that everything is going okay. But depression is actually very common. A lot of people struggle with depression. One of the things that I'm really grateful to see nowadays is some of the athletes are coming out and talking about their depression.
Yes.
With the gymnast, with the tennis player, and they are actually putting themselves first. I think as a society, we kind of think about, we have to do this for the good of society, but individual health is very important. So it's important to seek help when you aren't performing up to your usual potential. And it's okay to ask for help.
It is okay to ask for help, but you know what? Is it a thing maybe that people don't talk about it because they don't want people to see them as crazy? You're just crazy, or you just want attention.
And that's very common. As a psychiatrist, I frequently tell my patients that it's actually a sign of strength to come and talk to someone. You can prevent things from getting really bad. So it's not a sign of weakness or a deficit. It's a sign of strength that you're recognizing that you can benefit. Just like you take care of your body, you get health checkups, you have to get a mental health checkup. And as a society, I think we're moving in the direction of making it a normal part of treating yourself and getting health care for both your brain and your body.
Okay, so kind of walk me through this, and I'll start with you, Farah. I know that you are part of the mobile response team, correct? So tell me what that actually does.
So the nice thing about what we can do is that there's just a broad spectrum of support that we can provide. We're never going to turn anyone away who calls, whether it's somebody who is having those thoughts of suicide or ways to, like, they're planning ways to that they might act it out, all the way to they have been feeling depressed for the past couple of weeks and just didn't know who to reach out to. So we provide phone support. We have a hotline that we answer, and we also, as our name implies, we can go out in the community and meet people where they're at. So we have gone to schools, we've gone to people's homes. So if there is a concern about privacy, that is another way we can assist.
Okay, that's wonderful. So that's good information for people to know that there is help out there and you're not alone. But so many people feel like they are alone. They feel like when they're going through this crisis in their life, no matter what it was, maybe it was something traumatic that happened in their life. Maybe it was something from their childhood, as Wardena is going to talk about the childhood traumas along in this program. But maybe it was something from that time, and it has now surfaced. Sometimes I think we can keep things so pushed down in our lives, and then all of a sudden, something triggers it, and it begins to surface. And then once it surfaces, if we don't get a hold of it, if we don't talk to somebody about it, if we don't express how we're feeling, if we put that mask on again, then it starts to boil over. And then we're really in trouble, right?
Yeah. Vicki, can I take a moment and share a bit of information specific to the state of Michigan?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm not going to bombard you all and bore you with data, but So I want to talk about adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. Okay, so it's all types of abuse, neglect, and other potentially traumatic experiences that occur to people under the age of 18, from birth to 18. So specific to Michigan, the Michigan Health Endowment Fund did a study in Michigan in 2016. I'm going to share just a bit of you. 2.7 million, that's 30%, 39% of adults reported being verbally abused one or more times as a child. That abuse is one of the adverse childhood experiences. 1.9 million adults, 27% of those studied, reported having their parents separated or divorced. Again, one of those adverse experiences. 19% of adults reported physical violence between adults in their home. 29% reported substance abuse in their homes. 20% mental illness in the home. 18% that they were actually physically abused. 16% reported being sexually abused one or more times as a child. Now, this list goes on and on. So in 2016, 44% of Michigan adults with 4 or more of the ACEs were diagnosed with depression, compared to only 12% of those with 0 ACEs. That is an alarming gap, right? 12% versus 44. This trend was similar for those with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, asthma, poor mental health, poor physical health, poor overall health. And lastly, for this moment, 37% of adults with 4 or more ACEs are currently smokers. And we know that the health problems that follow us if we smoke, the cancer and breathing and all of those symptoms. 37% of those in this survey had 4 or more ACEs, and they smoke. It's a self-soothing. It kind of takes the edge off, takes my mind off. So these adverse childhood experiences lead to mental health and behavioral challenges in children. I shared that information about adults to let you know that those children that I'm going to talk about grow up to become the adults, and they die. They literally die on average 20 years sooner. I could smoke a pack of cigarettes a day and live longer. They die 20 years sooner than their counterparts who did not have those adverse childhood experiences. And as Dr. Kai said earlier, and if you pack it in, perhaps it was fairer. The more you pack it down, you pack it in, you add those ACEs to it, obviously the outcome is even worse.
Wow. Now, those are some alarming numbers. Really, they are. And, I thought about a little bit earlier today. I'll take us back a little bit to 2019. It's when we actually started with this pandemic. And I think we already had this kind of thing happening, but I think it got even more so relevant when that pandemic hit. And the reason I say that is because if you remember, everything was shutting down on us. People were stuck in their homes. They weren't able to get out. So that also played a part in your mental state. Am I right? So those same people that were already going through crisis, and if the facilities were shutting down and they weren't able to go there, maybe they had the teledoc, the telehealth, but it's not the same, I imagine, as being right there to be able to talk face to face about what's going on in your life. So here you are. It's like being in a dark hole, and you don't know which way to go and how to get out of it. And what do you do? Can any of you speak to that?
You're exactly right, Ms. Hill. During the pandemic, we've seen a marked rise in depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, suicides, partner violence, and abuse and neglect of children. So for all of those factors, not being able to connect with each other, we're naturally connecting. We like to connect with each other as human beings. You took that away, it led to a marked rise in all of these disorders. So it's important that we're having this conversation tonight because it's important that we do things that keep us connected, whether it's on the panel through the internet, whether it's because we're able to go to see someone face to face now because the pandemic is getting better, hopefully. But connection is the antidote to depression.
Absolutely. I remember someone I was speaking to who is going through or was going through a lot of mental health crisis. And she began to tell me, for one thing, she was afraid to let people know, especially people on her job, because she was afraid she'd lose her job because she had some mental health issues. She had changed different medications. The medications didn't seem to be regulating what was happening in her life. It wasn't getting her right. So what do? What do you say to people who are going through such things as that? What do you tell them?
I work for Saginaw County Community Mental Health Authority. I am a proud employee of the organization. Mental health, right? That's what we do for a living.
Mhm.
But I think every single staff person would hesitate before, getting on a soapbox and saying, I need help.
Mhm.
The stigma in our society it runs so deep,
Yes.
right? That even the mental health authority, we struggle, and there has to be a paradigm shift. There has to be a shift within this culture that makes it not just okay, but as one of the panelists said, it's a demonstration of strength. So there are cultural norms, like what happens in our house stays in our house.
Yeah.
For some communities, some cultures, I'm pretty sure we'll talk more about that. I mentioned that boys don't cry. You can't have a weakness. You can have a weakness. There is a stigma associated with mental health, so extreme. It runs so deep that our work is really cut out for us. And discussions like this, panel discussions, attending forums and trainings really do. It makes a difference. So a trusted family member, loved one. Notice I say trusted. But if you fail me, if I call you up, Vicki,
Mhm.
and you have such an endearing look on your face, and I give Vicki a call and I share with her, I bleed all over the place, and I let her know what's going on. And then I hear Evelyn at Panda House talking about me the next day. I know that I can't come back to Vicki. It's not the end of the world. Vicki just hasn't arrived yet, right? I'm using names so that we can actually, that our audience can actually
Absolutely.
remember this conversation. But
Mhm.
so I have to trust again because
Right.
I need help. So I talked to Kai. Kai, come on, let's sit at the table. Let's have a talk. I'm going to talk about you behind your back, Vicki, for breaking my trust.
Uh-huh.
So I would. But then I'm going to talk to Kai about what I'm thinking and feeling. And she's going to get me, kind of headed in the right direction, recommend professionals to call. You have to start somewhere and trust
Absolutely.
someone. You just have to start, and it won't always work the first time. The first therapist may not be a good fit, just as your doctor, a medical doctor, it may not be a good fit, and you get a second opinion. So in therapy, within mental health, if it isn't a good fit, then you keep trying, you keep knocking on doors. You may even kick a few doors in until you get that right fit and you get the help that you need, a combination of therapy or group or medication, whatever you need to stay healthy and stay alive for yourself, of course, and then for the people who care about you.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And that's, what, when I was talking to the person that I was talking to at the time, I said to that person, I'm not a professional. Not in that field. That's not my expertise, but I will listen to you. If you need to talk, I'm here for you. I will be here for you and I will give you whatever advice I can give you. But I am not an expert in that field. So, and I also advise, if it's not working for you with that particular doctor, then you need to find another. If that medication is not regulating you, then you need to find some different medication. And so they took what I said and hopefully they applied it, to their lives. But, that's the most I could do because it's not my lane. I can't get into that lane. I'm not that professional person. I was talking, and I'm going to bring Jason in for a minute here. Jason, I've known Jason for a very long time. And Jason has the best personality ever, laughs all the time, makes jokes all the time. When he walks in, he said, "Hey, Victoria," when I see him. So I was telling Jason about this forum, and Jason turned around and he began to tell me some things that he was going through that just it blew my mind because, like I said in the beginning, I had no idea. I didn't know. I had no idea that some things are happening in his life. So I'm going to let Jason talk a little bit about his story because we can sit here and we can talk about, which is all good. We can give all the information that we can possibly give. We can put all the numbers out there. We can tell you where to go, what to do, but it's a different feel to it when there's a personal story on it, because there are people out there who need to know I'm not alone. There's somebody else out there that's just like me or going through similar things as me. So that personal touch is always a great thing to put on it. So Jason, I'm going to let you tell a little bit about your story. And Jason had already put his story on Facebook. So, he's very comfortable in his skin about talking about it.
I think the first thing before I got into basketball, so that everyone on the panel is aware, I was a private security specialist that has worked in that field for many years, but for the last 8 years, it was a little bit more intense than initially started. My story goes from, I suffer from PTSD. I denied it for a long time. We're talking about masks, I'm more of a wall builder. I build my walls up very high, very thick. I went 17 years from May 10th, 2004 until May 25th, 2021 without shedding a tear. During that time, I lost my grandparents. I had a relative that was murdered. I lost 9 coworkers in the security world to suicide. I've lost relatives to suicide. None of it could bring me to shed a tear. I had lost all my emotional connections. And one of the things that compelled me was a few months ago, back in May, I was really spiraling. And as a basketball coach, one of the stigmas that we have is, we got to be strong. We got to be that rock. We got to be that person. So the reality of it is I needed another way to channel my experiences so that we could impact 75 kids at camp. And I started going to counseling back at the beginning of June, and it didn't take long for a lot of the symptoms of the PTSD to come out. And finally the counselor said, you need some help. And in denial for so long, my depression sends me into a rabbit hole that included alcohol. It included no sleep. It included sabotaging relationships, sabotaging myself, sabotaging happiness. I was a miserable, miserable person. But on the outside, if you saw me, as Vicki pointed out, I was happy. I was smiling. I tried to make other people laugh, realizing that I know how crappy it feels on the inside to feel sad, to feel bad, and I don't want anyone else to feel that way. And the problem with it is I end up hurting people around me trying to protect everybody, including myself. I've killed relationships unintentionally. Going down that rabbit hole of depression is not a great spot. Not realizing all the PTSD signs, the intrusive thoughts, the withdrawing. It's part of the depression, but it's also a major sign of the PTSD. I used to like going out. I used to like being out in public. I don't like going out in public. I don't like going out with people. As part of my assignments as a security specialist, I worked in executive protection, which means going out with a principal that we were assigned to protect in some cases. So by doing that, we were also assigned to different task force. So I got to work with human trafficking, sex trafficking. I got to work with the FBI on a couple of cross-state, interstate cases, just by being in the right place at the right time. But I also saw a lot of bad things. So as Vicki alluded to, I started writing a story about the things, the nightmares that keep me up, the 3-year-old child that I wasn't able to save, even though I wasn't around to even be in that realm of saving them, the guilt that I felt, the pain that I felt, and the nightmares that I had. I would go 72, 84, 96 hours without sleep. I would drink. I was a functional alcoholic, which is probably the worst type of alcoholic in my eyes, because the fact that you wouldn't know that I was drinking. You know, the other thing that I found out about trauma, and we talked a little bit about trauma earlier, is, you know, your trauma is yours. My trauma is mine. Mine isn't worse than yours. Mine isn't greater than yours. It could be if you're talking to a moderator that is trying to differentiate between the two, but what you feel on the inside, there is no difference. Whether your girlfriend breaks up with you, that situational sadness to you, if that's the worst thing you've experienced, that kills you on the inside. If you're a military individual, military personnel, and you end up taking someone's life, you feel that, you take that with you. That doesn't make it greater than one or the other. It's how you internalize it. I wasn't able to internalize mine. I buried mine. Everything I did, I buried. In my story, I had 2 parts. I had one that talked about my depression, which was about 11 pages, talked about being on the beach, sunny day without warning, black clouds rolled in and darkened the sun, and all I could see around me was the swirling of the clouds. And next thing you know, I was in a black hole, and like a maze, I didn't know how to get out. And then I wrote a story that I shared with Vicki about a couple of incidences that I was a part of. And I remember being asked, "How are you writing these chapters so quickly?" And I was like, "It's my story. You know, I don't have to fabricate anything. I did have to change some locations and some names, but the reality of it is when you live with that, you have to figure out a way." And I finally was able to find somebody that, from a counselor standpoint, that I can talk to. And, you know, you mentioned trust earlier, and she asked me point blank, "Do you trust me?" And I said, "No, I don't trust anybody." That is not a good personality trait to have. It really affects a lot of the way that I was engaging with everybody. And I'll try to land the plane here, but I wanted to take my message to our kids because of what I was going through, specifically in June and mid-June and late June, realizing that I had destroyed a lot of things around me, and basically looking over the rubble. The only thing that I could do is try to figure out a way to utilize that experience to better somebody else. So we talked to our kids about impact. We talked to them about simply saying, if you're walking in your hallway at school and you see somebody with their head down, or maybe they're walking by themselves, I did this little test. I said, all I want you to do, I'm going to count to 3. I want you to say, "Hey, how are you?" That's it. So I said 1, 2, 3, and we had 70 kids. "Hey, how are you?" I said, "How much effort did that take?" You could have just made the difference in that kid's life. You don't know. And it's kind of like working from the private side of security, is we deal a lot with intel, similar to what the FBI does and all the other acronyms out there in the security side of law enforcement. Is our job is to prevent things from happening. And maybe you saying hi to somebody, they may not kill themselves that day. Maybe they don't go home and cut themselves that day. Maybe they don't go home and lock themselves in the room in their own mind of depression. You don't know until you do it. And I wanted to be able to utilize a lot of the trauma that I've experienced. And when I gave my timeline of trauma to my counselor, the first thing she said was, "Holy, you can use whatever word you want." And I said, "That's only about a quarter of it, maybe a third of it." And she's like, "Well, we got a lot of work to do." But now I'm okay with that. I was that guy that was, not crying, unemotional, isolation. My story was called The Isolation Warrior. Did I choose this life, or did this life choose me? And the reality of it is, up until recently, it was the life that I had chose. And I've got to get better. And by sharing my story and being able to talk to people and being able to be on this panel and talk about depression, talk about anxiety, I had a hollow point that had my name on it. I was strong enough and fortunate enough not to ever have the suicidal ideals to carry it out. I have 2 kids that I am very, very blessed to have in my life. And I know the impact because I feel it, because I've experienced so much suicide that I know how the mushroom effect attacks people you didn't even know you made an impact on. And, that's where my story is. And I didn't want to bore you all with a 10-minute dialogue, so I apologize.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. Now, I'm just going to let, if any of you want to say anything about Jason's story. Is this typical? Is it typical of a person who is going through mental health crisis, not to be able to sleep, not to be able to socialize, not to shed a tear in so many years, no matter who's perishing around you? I mean, is this somewhat normal of someone who's going through a mental health crisis?
I can certainly speak to that. Trauma is really common. Go ahead, Jason.
No, I was going to say the other thing I wanted to say, and maybe you guys can tell this as well with that question that we talked about, is turning off survival mode and crisis mode, because having certain situations require crisis mode, survival mode. One of my personal issues that I experienced was I was never able to get out of those modes. Everything was a fight or flight, which then again, when you do either being behind. So I just wanted to talk about that survival and crisis mode, and if you could elaborate on those 2 specifics.
Thank you. I was going to say trauma is very common. We all have traumatic events in our lives. We lose someone that we love. Someone disappoints us. We don't get the job that we wanted. So we all are exposed to trauma. What happens in situations like Jason's is this trauma continues and continues and continues until eventually you shut down, like Jason said. You can't feel anymore because it just hurts too much to feel. So you don't feel. You don't react. Now, he mentioned the fight, freeze, or flight syndrome. You kind of just freeze and you don't react. So what I try and do when I tell people is that these are normal responses to stressful situations. And as therapists, as psychiatrists, we kind of help you go back and examine your story. We all have a story. And through examining your story, we help to heal you, help you to become the person that you are meant to be and the person that can cope with these traumatic events that have affected you so much. And the final thing that I want to say is that your body keeps the score. Your body's going to tell the story. Whether it's high blood pressure, whether it's diabetes, whether it's smoking too much, whether it's drinking too much, it's going to come out in your body. So it doesn't go away.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kai. And, as I was listening, and okay, so yes, everybody has trauma. Everybody goes through some sort of trauma throughout their life. And if you haven't, you keep living, you will, because that's just the way life is, right? But when we thought about doing the second part of this, even the first part of mental health, suicide awareness, a lot of times the mental health crisis marries up to the suicide. Am I right? There are a lot of people who they get to, like Jason said, he was in a rabbit hole and he didn't know how to get out. He didn't know what to do. Well, there are also people that are going through those same situations every single day of their life. They don't know what to do. They don't know who to talk to, who to trust. A lot of them feel like they can't trust anybody. So if you can't trust anybody, you're not going to talk to anybody. So when they're in this rabbit hole and they're going through this crisis, sometimes they find themselves on the other side of this. They find themselves with the contemplation of taking my life. I just want to end it. I don't want to go through this pain anymore. I just can't handle it anymore. Am I right?
I would agree with that. I would say a lot of times in talking to people, it's about escaping the pain they're experiencing. It's become, their life has been so difficult that it becomes a solution to the problems they're facing. And we've talked, it sounds like coping skills come up a lot in what we're discussing. And it's important to remember that not all coping skills are healthy coping skills, like smoking, drinking. Those are all things people use to cope with what's going on with them. And when we're growing up, we don't always learn those skills that are healthy for us and, nourish us in other ways. So I think framing it as not like a way for people to try to get attention, but it's really like they only see this as a solution. Their life, they feel so hopeless that this is the only solution they see in their life.
Absolutely. And as I spoke earlier, and I said, the person that said to me, some people look at them as they just want attention, oh, they're just doing that for attention, when they're really not. They're really going through a mental health crisis. And this particular person told me that what I do is when I get into this situation where I don't know which way to turn or how to handle what's going on inside of me, I go home and I cut myself. But I cut myself in places that nobody else can see. So it's not visible. So when that person gets back in front of other people, it's that sunshiny person, but deep down inside, that person is going through so much pain. They told me the only way they could relieve that pain was to go home and cut themselves.
And Vicki, I think, Jason, first, I'd like to literally applaud your courage, an absolute sign of strength for just look, I'm getting this out, and you'll never know how many lives you've impacted, hopefully young people. But we talked about, for instance, the depression, the sadness. It's very interesting that it is so often described as going down that rabbit hole. That's a very common definition, description of my experience. And if I'm in a rabbit hole, I can't breathe, I can't see, I can't find my way out. And the solution is, as Farah said, let's just end it all. I can't stay in this hole. And the sadness, depression, the adverse childhood experiences manifest themselves in so many different ways. And in the classroom, for instance, the child who is fighting everyone, just if you look at them sideways, there's a fight, and the teacher, you're out to get me, and there's always this attention seeking behavior, but I don't know how else to respond. And instead of us so quickly saying, what is wrong with that child? What happened to him? What happened to her? Because this isn't a normal response. It right? So imagine one of the examples that is shared during the ACEs trainings is that you see a bear. You're in the woods, you see a bear, and your heart starts pounding and racing, and you can either, you kind of weigh the odds, and I can take this bear, probably not. You're going to run. So the fight, the flight, you make a real quick decision. My heart is pounding, and I run, and I'm out of danger. But if I'm experiencing these ACEs, my heart doesn't stop pounding. It's the same if my teacher touches me as that person who touched me inappropriately in my bedroom last night. My heart is pounding just as much, and I'm going to fight just as quickly. The teacher, the principal, my peers, my sibs, I'm just always in fight mode. Over time, as I enter adulthood, my heart has been pounding, and that, you see, when we talk about it actually manifests with physical, medical sickness and disease. You can't stay in that mode of fighting all the time. nor can you be afraid and hiding and running all the time, right? So here come the sickness and disease, and the single most, we'll talk about resilience as we move on, but the single most effective tool, if you will, to help a kid towards resilience, toward a healthy place, is a caring adult. It's a caring adult. The exercise that Jason just shared, just look and say hello. That kid who's coming into your classroom, just a gentle tap. Good morning, your seat is over there, as opposed to the teacher who would say, we're not going to have it today. I'm in fight mode. I am ready to fight. You see the difference? A caring adult. It doesn't mean you have to move a kid in with you. It could be the neighbor and you bake cookies. Be careful, the sugar, the diabetes, all that. But maybe you make the best cookies. And just knowing that you're there and that you care. That coach. Now, you mentioned earlier, Vicki, that people come to you because you just got that look, Vicki. I would come to you too. So people come to you, they share, they open up. And we have to be careful that we do stay in our lane. Just as you said, I'm not a therapist, I'm not this or the doctor or whatever. I don't give medical advice. That's what Google is for. I'm joking, guys. Do not go to Google for medical advice. But stay in your lane. Mm-hmm. Take care of you too. Mm-hmm. If I'm experiencing trauma, sadness, depression, and I try to take care of all 6 of you, it's going to take me out, right? So you have to know your limits. If people come to you frequently, get a list. There's one going across the screen right now. Jot it down, and you can direct people. You can send them in the right direction. But we don't have all of the answers all of the time. I'm one of 11 kids. I can't help all 10 of them. It would, you see, and it would suck the life right out of me. So we have to be mindful that we care for ourselves and our own mental health when we're in helping professions, or we just have that personality.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wardine. I appreciate it.
I just want to add one thing.
Go ahead, Jason.
Sorry. No,
go ahead.
One of the words that I'd like to talk about are the triggers. You know, we were talking about getting into that fight or flight and freeze mode. You know, that kid that's looking to punch somebody, or for that, you know, there doesn't have to be, but more than likely, a high percentage, there's a trigger, something that triggers that a lot of people, and the one thing I like, I have experience in going through, talking to chaplain that may have had, you know, some military experience before he got back stateside. Somebody who has relation to what it is that you're going through. I could never figure out what my triggers were. I'm finding them out now that I'm more aware and that I'm actually allowing myself to feel. But I don't think there's enough training out there for a branch manager at a credit union that can identify or help identify those triggers so that you can, you know, appropriately heal those triggers once you identify them. I just something that I'm new to this in terms of opening up, but I know that you have to allow yourself, and people don't trigger, your response is the trigger to a situation when your heart's racing, when that person's walking down the hallway, whether they're physically or sexually abusing you. And, you know, that's a lot for your life to go. And I think the other worst thing to feel, and I'm sure you've had clients, is when you feel that your heart's racing and your heart rate at 60, but your mind, your mental aspect of it is telling yourself that all you're feeling is pitter patter, and you check it instantly at resting heart rate, which it's terrible because now you got that weight on your chest, but there's nothing wrong.
Thank you, Jason. Could someone speak to triggers? Because I know that there are trigger points, and I'd like Jason said, he's starting to figure out what his triggers are. but not everybody has come to that point yet. Not everybody has figured out what is triggering all of these different things. One other person said to me, and as you're getting ready to answer that, they told me that their mental crisis is not always situational. It's not always a situation that puts them in that crisis. Can someone speak to that as well?
Speaking about triggers, our brain is composed of things that we remember consciously and things that are unconscious, things that we have buried deep down inside of us. So it could be a smell, it could be a sound, it could be a touch, like Wardine said, that triggers a memory that you push down because it was just so painful you could not deal with it. So triggers require usually some work with a therapist. And I'm a very strong proponent of therapy. It's essential to address mental health issues. Medication alone is never enough. Therapy is really important. You really have to talk about what you've gone through and get help to identify triggers and heal. And then you mentioned the other part of the question, Vicki, regarding sometimes you don't have any triggers, things just happen. So depression is a physical illness as well. We know that people that have family histories of depression are more likely to have difficulty with depression because of genetic factors. It's literally in your genes. It may not be triggered unless you have an environmental stressor, such as something that happens that's really difficult, but you're more likely to be predisposed to it because of your genes, just like you may be predisposed to high blood pressure or diabetes. So it's both a combination of biological factors and environmental factors. So it really is not your fault, if you're struggling with it. Some of it may be predestined based on your family history.
Wow, that's very interesting. That's very interesting to know that it's a part of our biology, that it's there. That's really good. Well, as I was saying about the person that told me that a lot of times when she falls into her mental health crisis or her depression, it's not always situational, but it becomes clinical. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And I know that, go ahead, Wardine, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. You were going to add to that.
Yeah, I know that you wanted to talk about the childhood traumas. So I'll let you go ahead and do that.
Oh, so it is. It's Wardine. Okay, I'm going to share, and it's ACEs. It's so simple that what took so long for us to kind of put this all together. So there is a training. Michigan, our state has been just huge on the ACEs training. So there are cohorts that have gone through the training. There are facilitators. There are trainers of trainers. So if your club, organization, church, whatever group, if you'd like to know more about ACEs, if you'd like to be trained in the model so that you can continue to sustain the training, the knowledge base within your community, your circle, call Dr. Kai. I'm joking. There are a number, that the numbers are going across the screen, but we want a trained, informed community. So the ACEs, it's abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. There's neglect, emotional neglect, and physical neglect. Now, the information that I shared with you earlier, the stats that I shared, the data from 2016, that was pre-COVID. That was pre the last 2 years of turmoil and unrest across the nation that continues. So imagine if that study were being done today, how high those numbers would be. Alarming. When I speak of children, the abuse and neglect, one of the safest places for a child to be is in the classroom, because there's someone who will notice scratches and bruises, sadness, depression. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. So that kid who's up front cutting up, but you notice a child who moves further to the back and is just silent and won't communicate, won't participate in anything. A teacher, the classroom aide, the cafeteria worker, the janitor, It's a single caring adult who will notice, and then perhaps, we can come together, we can circle that child or that family and get the help that they need. But our kids have been out of the classroom. So where are those watchful eyes? Who's keeping an eye on those children? So this pandemic and the shutdowns and so forth, it's taking its toll on the mental health and well-being of the children and families in our community. So I mentioned neglect, but then there's also household dysfunction. If someone has been incarcerated, parental divorce, substance use, mental health disorders. So we put all of these ACEs together. Now, guess what? In 2019, the American Pediatrics Society identified racial discrimination as an adverse childhood experience. So you take any combination of these and be Black or brown, and I'm going to take it up a notch and be a kid who identifies LGBTQ. You take any of those factors and you add those to these ACEs, it's a recipe for disaster. So I am going and cutting or the suicidal thoughts and that, or the fighting. I just can't, so all of these things can't get a hold of it, and my heart is breaking. So the truth about ACEs, it's a very simple model to understand. If you choose to be a facilitator, it's very intensive. It's not for the faint at heart. You have to dig in. Dr. Kai can tell you that in the epigenetics, it actually talks about how our brain is wired in certain ways, and we can actually change the DNA and that, so that I pass on sickness and disease. It starts with my generation and passes on because of my trauma and how I respond to it. Jason mentioned earlier, the boy who commits suicide or attempts suicide because the girlfriend broke up and the kid right next to him just went and got another girlfriend. But that kid's parents are going through a divorce and he doesn't know where to turn, right? It just depends. My trauma is my trauma. What happened to me, and I can't minimize what happens in another kid, nor can you minimize a divorce. And I'll be transparent. When I went through the training and a lady kept talking about divorce, get in line, right? Every 50% of families, but man, it takes kids out. So we don't have the right, any of us, to judge what's causing trauma and pain in another human being. What we must do is ask what happened or what is happening and do the best we can to alleviate the stress, the pain, the discomfort. And I agree with, the rest of the panel that, of course, therapy, that it's just a real good place to start with no shame, no stigma. We have to, as a culture, as a society, break that stigma. Kids are literally dying on our watch, and there's much that we can do to prevent it.
Yes, thank you, Wardine. And yes, we do need to break that stigma, but how do we do that? How do we do that? How do we convince a person to go and see someone, to talk it out? How do we tell them how do we convince them there is no shame in it when they feel like there is shame, when they feel like they cannot say anything to anybody because of the stigma of all of the things? You're just looking for attention. You're just crazy. You're just acting out. When I was young, they used to have older people would have a saying, kids are to be seen and not heard. Okay, that's one of the things they should have gotten rid of a long time ago, but it still stands. You grow up thinking that way. Kids are to be seen, not heard. So if even a child is going through something in their home, and like you say, when COVID hit, there was no place to go. So if you were already going through something in your home, it just got worse. And if I'm that kid who can only be seen and not heard, what happens? How do we get rid of the stigma, first of all, and say it's okay for us to go and seek out a professional. There is no shame in it. There is no shame if I've got to take a medication that's going to regulate my moods. What do we do? How do we help?
I don't want to take all, Dr. Kai, go ahead. I don't want to take all the time. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think we start by saying that your brain is just as important as your body. We normalize it from the very beginning. We talk about it in school. We talk about you get a mental health checkup when you get your physical checkup. When you see your doctor asks you questions about how are you doing? Who is in your world? Who do you talk to when you're upset? Where do you get support from? It should be part of every physical health evaluation. So we have to make it a normal part of our culture. We don't isolate the therapist, the psychiatrist to one different area away from the physical health doctors. Everybody's together, working together as a team. So we have to make it a normal part of our culture. And then in school, we have to talk about it. And we have to make it okay to talk about things that are happening and to let people know that when you do talk about it, it will be held in a confidential way so you can get the help that you need.
I like that, Dr. Kai. So you talk about we need to educate in school. Is there a program in school that is educating on mental health awareness or suicide awareness? Is it being taught in our schools? And if it's being taught, is it being taught at what level in our schools?
I think
Go ahead, Wardine.
the Saginaw Public Schools, and I think throughout the county and then the state, they are very focused. There is a parent liaison who is training parents, because the conversation that we're having now, moms need to know that, you know how people say, well, it happened to me and I'm just fine. You're totally not. You're not fine. And we have to change that language. So Dr. Kai talked about on from a professional standpoint, and I'm going to take it like into the backyard. When people tell jokes that are offensive and we all laugh, when you know, and even if we know there's something wrong with it, we just, you know, kind of, geez, what a jerk, and we look the other way. Use your voice, because if we tell jokes about somebody who's crazy and getting therapy, and the little kid in the other room can hear that, he's never going to speak up. She's never going to speak up because we're giving the message. So it's very, very easy for, if we're having a conversation and, well, no, Farah, you know, I wonder about that, because I know that at mental health, they address issues like this. And it's, you know, we educate in our everyday. You see a child in Kroger ripping things down, and everybody's going, oh, that child just needs a good whipping. Except not. They don't. I can say, you know what? It's the end of the day and I'm hungry too. I feel like turning a few things over. I've given that mom permission to calm down, right? And that child permission to cut it out already before you do get in trouble. But, you know, our language, how we interact with one another, with strangers, with our families, within our social circles, this panel and discussions like this, we get the word out. It's us, each one of us who supports one another. Participate. Mental Health Awareness Month. Wear your green ribbon. Somebody's going to ask you why, and you get to tell them. How we isolate and exclude children who are screaming for help. So we suspend or expel them, right? And now there's no one to scream to. We sent them back into the lion's den or the rabbit hole, and just no way out. So just, there is the professional, right? That arena, the systems, but each one of us must take responsibility for our own little sphere of influence and just make the change. If you're involved in a club or your church, Pastor, I'd love to have some of these people come and present to us so that the kids in the ministry will get the help and the services that they need. So we can take responsibility. We can educate our community. There are, as mentioned earlier, athletes, actors, actresses coming out and saying, I've been hurting, dying on the vine, and now I get to say it. and I can breathe and I'm still rich and famous. You can still do great things. You will do great things and get the help that you need. It'll help you to get from here to there.
Thank you. Thank you. That was good. Go ahead, Evelyn.
Yes, I want to ask a question. So, what would you do? What would you tell a family or families that have someone that's having behavior crisis, and they've hurt the family, or even they don't even recognize the family. They turn against the family, but in the end, we know that individual needs their family. What do you say to the families that just that feel like giving up? What do you say to them because they're so hurt and embarrassed, everything you can think of? What do you say? What do you say to those parents?
Sarah, do you want to respond?
I think we first recognize the toll it takes on loved ones when somebody is not accepting of help or denying that there is an issue. I think that's the first step, is just validating their experience as well, and not saying, like, not laying blame or saying like this is a problem that you created, because that isn't a sensitive way to approach the situation, and you're just going to alienate people in that way. I think when somebody isn't willing to accept the help and they're a loved one of yours, at that point, it's important for you to focus on yourself as well, and your own mental health, and what's within your control to change.
Okay, that's great. That's great. All right. And another question I have is, Women of Color has been going to the Juvenile Center for over 12 years, and we've heard all sorts of stories, heartbreaking stories. And a lot of these young people are just angry. And we know most times they're traumatized. They don't realize they're traumatized. And, I can remember one young lady just saying, I've been to a therapist, but I don't trust the therapist. I just sit there and and don't say anything. So for a whole hour, they're just sitting there not saying anything. And so what is your comments on that? I really want to know.
I worked in juvenile justice for over 15 years, and I definitely agree with you that for a long time, we didn't know how to handle these children. We blamed them. We called them delinquent, when really, as Wardena said, we should have been asking them, what happened to you? How can I help you? Tell me your story. So I think we have to kind of take the blame for that, and we educate everybody that works with children how to approach these children and really listen to them and really learn their stories. And Jason mentioned that he didn't trust at first. It's going to take time. These children have been traumatized. They're not going to trust you right away. But you've got to hang in there with them. You know, let them know that you care about them, and they will feel that. And eventually, they'll begin to open up. Maybe not with the first therapist, maybe not with the second therapist. Eventually, they'll open up, and they'll begin to allow you to help them to heal themselves. So we've got to re-educate how we deliver care and how we approach the children.
Great. Thank you. Wow.
That was good. Yes, I can agree with what Evelyn said, because we were at the juvenile facilities just recently, and we ran into that thing where they felt like they can't trust anybody. They're not going to trust anybody. And I was just kind of floored when she said, we sat in the room for 2 straight hours. I didn't say anything to her. She didn't say anything to me. I'm like, oh my goodness, what is really happening here? So, we do have to educate. We have to, as you say, we don't want to blame the child for what they've been going through. They just don't know how to handle it. And we've had a lot of numbers that have been scrolling across the bottom of the screen where people can actually call and get the help they need. And if someone wants to go ahead and shout that number out there, if you know what we're doing, it's across the screen. It says Saginaw County Crisis Hotline, and it gives a number. There's a number that's going across the screen right now. And then also the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which I like that word because we want to save a life, right? Mm-hmm. We don't want to see any lives that are going to be lost. This has been a great discussion tonight, Mental Health Suicide Awareness Part 2. And we want to try to help all that can be helped. We want to get the information out the resources out where they can go, what they can do, who they can call, who they can trust. That's important, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
So we want to get all of that stuff out to the people that are listening, who are looking on to us. This is really good. This has been a great discussion tonight. You guys have been great. I thank you so much for being a part of the panel. Jason, for you that told your story, your personal story.
Yeah.
Everybody can't do that. Everybody can't stand in front of other people and just completely be totally transparent. It's not as easy as most people think it could be. It's not that easy. But I appreciate the fact that you put a personal touch on it. I always say we can throw out all the numbers we want, we can give out all the information we want, but sometimes we need to hear that personal story because somebody else is going through the same things that you are going through. In fact, I scrolled through Facebook before I got on the panel tonight, and I saw someone on there that said, I just want God to just end it all for me. What is that? It's a cry for help, right? It's a cry for help, but it's a cry for help on Facebook. But I don't think that person went any further than Facebook. So speak to that, anybody who would like to, not just put it on Facebook, but what else should they do?
Right. Right.
I can start. There, like the numbers below, there's so many resources available. It's just a matter of finding them and getting to that point where you are comfortable reaching out. And sometimes Facebook feels anonymous, and that's why they feel comfortable reaching out in that way. And there's generational differences too. So younger kids feel like more comfortable texting than actually talking to a voice on a phone. So there are different ways to reach out. And I think just as a society, we should try to work on our own familiarity with these things. Just like we know like basic first aid for like physical things like cuts, bruises, things like that. We should know the basics for any sort of mental health cuts or bruises.
Thank you, Farah. I appreciate that. And you said it's anonymous, but yet again, it isn't anonymous,
Right.
because I saw the name. I know the person, right? So they're putting their names out there, you know, and it's a cry for help. That's the way I look at it. I don't know what was going on, but it's a cry for help. And, you know, if that person is looking on tonight, you know, what we can say to you is the numbers are scrolling across the screen. Pick up a phone. You could text. I see there's a text on there as well. If you're not one of those people who will pick up a phone and call someone, send a text. But there is help out there for you. That's what we want to get across. There is help out there. There is someone who can help guide you to the place that you need to be. Am I right?
Yes, and Farah mentioned first aid. We have a program called Mental Health First Aid. And mental health first aid just means that you pay attention, like you said, Vicki. You notice that person on Facebook, you reach out to them. You say, I see you on Facebook. How can I help? Can we talk? I'm here for you.
Jason, did you want to say something as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, things that we can make an impact as coaches, as teachers, as educators, everybody in the community that is well respected. Being talk about, but when we talk to them, we tell them, you somebody you have to, you have our coaching. Again, staying, just giving those kids, if you are ever going through something, pick up the phone. I always say, put that as one of my things on Facebook with a story. Make the call. Make the call. And I think, you know, we talked earlier about, you know, the professionals and the athletes. That's great, but when you don't have that personal connection, that intimate connection with somebody who stands in front of you, as a coach could, as a teacher can, a principal, a counselor at school, and it goes on kids too. I mean, same thing, coworkers, bosses. You know, having the ability to make your employee, your players, your kids feel comfortable. But again, it's easier when you know that they have a little bit of experience in what it is that you're experiencing. You're more apt to understand that you can talk to them because there is that connection, not giving them professional advice. But I find that to be one of the things we've gotten our statements with. You can't say you didn't know you could call somebody. You didn't know, you can say you didn't know there were numbers scrolling across the bottom of your screen. You just have to actively want to get better. And it's okay. And it took me, I'm 44 years old, it took me a long time. And again, I've ruined a lot of great things in my life in the process. But I also know that continuing on this trend and being able to impact other people by being here and being present and not committing suicide and not taking my life and not impacting people in that way, you know, is going to be an opportunity down the road that I hope will impact somebody else. And, you know, there's the pay it forward mentality. But I really think if they got somebody close to them in their lives, again, and I just know coaches are great, teachers are great, STEM coaches, not just the athletic coach, robotics coaches, you know, being able to just be there and let the kids know that their phone is open, they're you know, they're just there. You just got to be there. You got to be willing to be there, and not, you know, hide yourself away, especially when you can make an impact on somebody.
And Jason, what you just described, all of the child serving systems, the ACEs initiative, the Michigan ACEs initiative is just has launched, I think, one cohort 14 or so groups throughout the state of Michigan. The Department of Health and Human Services, mental health, education, legal. You'd be amazed. Our juvenile court judge, Judge Meaders, they in sentencing, in making decisions and determinations about kids, one of the first things she considers is mental health. What types of trauma? Now, you can't give away the story. You can't go and cause harm to others, and there are no consequences, even if the underlying cause is mental health. So don't think we're giving you permission to go out and do whatever you want. But the judge, I mean, how cool is that in our community, Saginaw County, that the judge considers the history of trauma, whether parents are incarcerated and so forth. They're looking at the whole person, not just those actions. The faith community, we're training throughout the faith community. Within my organization, mental health, they're looking at, you know, your physical condition, your medical condition, your mental health, what types of meds, your weight, you know, there's a whole picture, a very holistic approach, if you will, to each individual, and it is very unique. It is, imagine our mobile urban, nope, I'm saying MUT, MRSS team, I'll get it. It was MUT. I said MUT for 10 years, but that they will come out, they will respond to a crisis in the moment, and they have gone from 8 hours a day into the evening to 24/7 very, very soon. That is amazing for this community, for Saginaw County. So everybody, you know, all of the systems, the child serving systems are in place and trying to pull it together and be educated, knowledgeable. I recognize there's a kid that I just can't help, but the therapist in the office next to me could be the answer. So we just keep trying and trying until we get it right, until we get to the bottom of it. And as you said, that person who sat for 2 hours, I don't know what clinical approach that was, but I mean, she must have meant something. So like if you have to get another opinion, if you have to get another therapist, do that, but live, choose to live.
Oh, yes, definitely. Thank you, Wardine. So I'm thanking every one of you for being a part of our panel tonight. And I'll just go around the panel here tonight if you want to say any last minute words before we end our discussion tonight. I want to thank you all. You all have given out some great information, told us about some great resources. I've enjoyed this tremendously. I'll start with you, Dr. Kai, if you'd like to say some last words.
I'd like to say that thank you for being on this panel. It was very informative. I enjoyed being a panel participant. And everyone that's listening, please remember that it's okay to ask for help. It is not a sign of weakness. Help is available. There is strength in connecting and reaching out and talking to someone, starting with your friend, your pastor. Just reach out and talk to someone.
Thank you. Jason?
No, I just want to end and for sharing and everybody that has tuned in. You know, make the just take the call. It's important, and your life is certainly worth it. No matter what you're going through at the time, just make the call. Someone's going to be there to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Farah?
Yeah, so thank you for having me here. I just wanted to reiterate that everyone in our mental health field is trained to not be judgmental. They're not going to make any judgments about the things that you're going through. They're not going to minimize if you feel like it's not a big deal. They're going to respect whatever you say to them. So please reach out.
Thank you, Farah. Wardine?
I just thank you for including me in the conversation this evening. It's been great. And to the audience, let's heal this community. Let's be that voice, that one caring adult that kids need to get from here to there. It's you, it's the coach, it's all of us. It's our job to keep kids safe, and we can do it.
Thank you, Wardine. And I am Vicki Hill with Women of Colors, also the radio personality at KISS 107.1. And I'm going to turn it over to the president of Women of Colors, which is Evelyn McGovern. Evelyn.
Thank you, Vicki. And I just want to thank everyone who joined us. And I would like to express my sincere appreciation to each of our panelists for sharing, and to everyone who helped with this event, including Alpha Media and staff. And Vicki, thank you so much for always doing an awesome job, and our Women of Colors Community Forum Committee and the members of Women of Colors, and also our sponsor, Mid-State Health Network. And I really just pray that someone was blessed today. And so with that, we conclude Time to Have a Conversation, the second part for suicide and mental health. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.